Welcome to the SEI podcast series, a production of the Carnegie Mellon University Software Engineering Institute. The SEI is a federally funded research and development center sponsored by the U.S. Department of Defense. A transcript of today's podcast is posted on the SEI website at sei.cmu.edu/podcasts.
Welcome to the SEI podcast series. My name is Suzanne Miller, and I'm a principal researcher in the SEI Software Solutions Division. Today, I'm joined by Lyndsi Hughes and David Sweeney to discuss their application of Agile and DevSecOps principles in complex systems, hardware, and other atypical uses. Lyndsi is a senior systems engineer in the SEI CERT Division, and David is also in the CERT Division as an associate software engineer. Welcome to you both.
Thanks for having us.
Really glad to be speaking with you. I've worked with Dave before. I've interviewed Lyndsi, so this feels like old home week. So it's all good. Lyndsi, we have had you on our show before with Vanessa Hughes discussing your framework for DevSecOps adoption, and we will link to that. David, you're new to our podcast series, so you get to go first in telling us about your background, what brought you to the SEI, and what's cool about the work that you do here.
Sure. So what brought me to the Institute was, well, truthfully, this was my first position out of college. That being said, though, I've stuck around for a while now because the work we do here is so interesting. And I think one of the things that really separates us out from other locations is I'm doing new things very regularly versus other friends who I'm like, hey, what's new? Oh, working on the same project that I've been working on for 5 years. And it's like, oh, that's fun. I mean, good for you, but that's not quite the cup of tea I like.
David, are you trying to tell me that you're easily bored?
No, I'm just always fascinated and interested. You keep it interesting here.
I agree. I've been here for going on 20 some years, and I am easily bored. So, it's got to be interesting if it's going to keep me here. So, and Lyndsi, some of our audience members may not have heard your other podcast. So can you also tell us a little bit about yourself as well and what brought you to the SEI and what's cool about the work that you do here?
Yeah, absolutely. I have been at the SEI for about 12 years now. And like David, this has been my first job straight out of graduate school. So I have very much enjoyed my time here. Unlike Dave, who's been focused on a lot of different software projects, I tend to be focused more on the infrastructure side of the house and supporting software developers and analysts in a number of different ways. So I have lost my train of thought. I get to work on lots of different infrastructure projects that support various efforts, research and otherwise here at the Institute.
Excellent. So let's get into our topic. So modern software engineering practices of Agile and DevSecOps have provided a foundation for producing working software products faster, more reliably than ever before. I think we can all agree on that. And far too often, though, these practices really focus on the software product, and they don't tend to think as much about or don't tend to address the business mission, capability, delivery aspects of products that are non-software, right? So we know from working with multiple large organizations in DoD and in my team, in the Agile transformation team, that you can't just lift and shift Agile practices from software product development into non-development areas. So walk us through your perspective of the traditional landscape and why ignoring the business mission and non-software capability delivery aspects is a problem.
Sure. So when we talk about, you're absolutely correct, Suze, that a lift and shift doesn't exactly work, especially when you look at when you look at the traditional development of building software, testing software, that doesn't translate necessarily to non-software roles. And so we see that when you do apply Agile or DevSecOps principles to more business side of things, it is still very helpful when you start taking on the principle of always trying to improve. When you think about how, let's actually look at our process and start asking the question of why. So what are our pain points? These kind of things are very helpful. And obviously for business side of things, within acquisitions as well, a lot of the current pipelines they just aren't working. People complain, people are upset. So there's pain out there.
Okay. And Lyndsi, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I think in addition to what Dave said, when you're looking at the traditional landscape, particularly Agile, the Agile manifesto was written by software developers for software developers. So they had in mind a very specific application, a very specific problem set that they were up against and that they were trying to solve. And they came up with a really ingenious solution for that problem, but it's very narrowly focused. We think, like Dave said, there are really good aspects of the Agile methodology and of DevSecOps that can be applied in other areas that are not the development of software. And it's just a matter of, as Dave said, understanding your pain points and then understanding those Agile and DevSecOps processes and knowing which of those can help alleviate the pain that your organization is feeling in your specific area.
I just we were just talking with a group of testers this morning, actually, at a meeting, and that are bringing Agile IV and V practices, into their world, which is a place that you don't normally think about it. And that's something that NASA did a few years back that is, was revolutionary at the time. And we're seeing more and more of these folks. And I'm going to assert, and I want to see if you agree with it, that the pain point that drives many of these non-software organizations to embrace Agile is twofold. If you're on the hardware side, you see that, if you have Agile at the bottom of the V, you keep seeing Agile software being implemented faster than you can integrate it. So you get this very sort of cognitive dissonance thing going on of like, wait, no, you're too fast. And people start asking the question, well, why can't we be that fast, right? Why can software be that fast and we don't? So that's assertion number one. Assertion number two is that on the business side, the many kinds of regulatory aspects of acquisition and various aspects of mission operation, people are starting to question, how much of that do we really need to do? The DoD Adaptive Acquisition Framework 5000.87 is, the first framework from OSD that actually lays out iterative incremental development as a legal, if you will, possibility. And so we're starting to see, I think that came out a couple of years ago. I think we're starting to see people saying, well, we can do this. We just have to figure out what's the best way and how to address our particular pain points. Would you agree with those assertions, or amend them in some way?
I will say that I have definitely lived in the land of your first assertion that software developers are moving quickly. And sometimes they get upset when the infrastructure team can't support what they are saying they need for some reason. And I think part of that problem is when you're looking at the capability to deliver value, right? That pipeline platform level of a software development shop. Those folks they want to enable the developers to succeed, and they also have in mind all of these other requirements that are forced upon them for business reasons, for regulatory reasons, that makes it sometimes difficult to provide to the developers the exact capabilities they want to support a particular project at a given time. So you're sort of straddling in both worlds of trying to maintain a stable, secure, resilient infrastructure and be on the bleeding edge of the latest technologies so that your software developers can work quickly and develop products faster.
At the speed of need, as we talk about. So, David, did you want to comment?
Yes. Well, so I think Lyndsi covered that first point really well, and I'm in agreement. The second assertion I definitely agree with as well, especially when we talk about policy. Policy should be enabling you and shouldn't be this pain point that it has become. And so we're starting to see a lot of people, especially once you start taking on this kind of mindset of how can we improve, of this policy hurts. Like, this makes it a very painful process. So is this actually a necessary policy, or do we need to amend it in some way? to actually allow us to do work and be more agile, be swift. Well,
be more
actually, swift is a poor word. Yes.
So in your recent blog post, you called for this expansion of the traditional software product focused DevSecOps pipeline to teams who are focused on other aspects of capability delivery and mission system and business for the organization. So tell us about the new approach and I think we've kind of already covered what's your catalyst for widening that aperture. We all want to see the whole system move more quickly than just the software move more quickly.
Yeah, I think the answer to this question you're asking, Suze, is sort of an expansion of all the things we've been talking about already. Is there's definitely a need to be able to provide a platform that has capabilities that the developers want and that the developers need to do their jobs, and taking that iterative mindset out of DevSecOps and applying that to the way that you integrate new capabilities and new features into the infrastructure, I think is a really valuable approach. And that's what we have seen in our work with some of our customers, and that's what we've tried to implement even in-house here within our own lab environment that our team manages. So it's really all about making things repeatable, so that as new people are onboarded, we're able to teach them how things work in our environment, and we're able to have them be productive as quickly as possible. And it's automating as much as is feasible. I think when we're talking about the capability delivery pipeline, there are some things that are much harder to automate than when you're talking about a straightforward software development pipeline. And so it's a matter of automating things where you can and making them repeatable where you can't, and iterating over the needs and the requirements and adapting as required.
Yeah, I mean, the process comes very much the same on the business side of the house as well. Especially when we talk about like something like acquisitions, where a lot of it is very repeatable. So that's good out of the gate in terms of creating a pipeline, but we could also then automate parts of it. And when you look at, as we go through the process, a lot of what you see can be automated, and that's awesome.
One of the things that I've seen is automating the preparation for decision making. So you're not automating the decision making in a business environment, but you're automating the preparation for that decision. You're making it feasible for the collection of the data that's needed for a particular, say, configuration control board or acquisition board, so that the instead of people spending lots of time gathering that information through email and such, you've got a repository that is the deposit point for everyone. And you've got a schedule where if you don't get your stuff in time, you get an email or, some kind of a notification that, hey, we're waiting for you before we can go to the next step and things like that. And those, they're pretty simple things when you really think about it, but they're just not the way we've done it before. Right. And so it's changing people's mindset away from, sort of serial email to, hey, we just need to collect all this data. It just needs to be there in time for making this decision. It doesn't matter how we get to it, but it needs to be in a safe, secure place. And then we can go ahead and move forward. Are you seeing some of that mindset shift especially in the business areas that you work with?
Yes. In particular traditionally it goes from A to B to C for approvals, right? For certain people. But what I've seen is they're also starting to say, like, does A really need to pass it to B, then to C? Or can we really just like hand it and get all three approvals at once? And so kind of like this deserialization of approvals as well, of like, we could look at these different stakeholders and say, hand it all to you at once and say, just please approve this, rather than like, all right, so this guy's approved it. Now we got to pass it over to the next guy, the stakeholder. So there's ways to also automate, or not automate, but deserialize the approvals as well.
I like that term, because that's a lot of what we see happening. The other thing that I'm seeing and I work with a large DoD program that's applying these constructs, across their entire mission and business space to varying degrees. But the idea of moving away from these asynchronous things like PowerPoint as a way of communicating, having the communication be something that everyone has access to all the time. As soon as something changes, you have notifications. And so, you can, instead of having to have a presentation built from that data, you just go look at the data. And that's been a game changer for the program I'm working on. Is that something that you're seeing as well?
Yes, pretty much exactly that. The other thing that we're seeing as well is that the business people start to get hungry for.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, once they get a taste of it and they start actually enjoying it, they get very hungry. I would almost say ravenous for it, which is totally fine. I'm happy to help with that. In fact, that makes it even more exciting once you get that, you see that hunger and that desire to continue.
I don't know if you have this. We have a special role called a toolsmith, partly because of that appetite, right? Because not everybody in the contracting space, for example, is going to be able to work with the tools that enable a lot of this to happen. But they have somebody assigned to them that can create dashboards, can change the workflow to meet your needs and things like that. And that toolsmith role has been very critical in enabling them to move forward, with some of these ideas and to satisfy that ravenous appetite. I'll put it that way.
Sure, especially like when it comes to leveraging automation to make the business people's lives just a little bit easier here and there. But it's very surprising how excited they get over it too, because it probably hasn't happened before. And it is exciting. Your life's been made easier. Your job's easier. You move faster.
I will say I haven't had anyone that I know of that's come into the program and said, oh yeah, we did this over here. I know how to do this. We've done this somewhere before. As you say, it's new to many of the, especially the people in the government space. And so we are, we're seeing a lot of pathfinders. So I've talked a little bit about the program that I work with. Tell me about some of the programs that you're working with and what you're doing with them, to help them move away from just software product development as the focus for Agile.
Sure. So one engagement was with the Navy, and that was taking their existing acquisitions process, which was a paper process, and then turning that into at the start, just a digital process of here's the process as is, and then start iterating over it to see all right, so what, how long is it taking? Okay, it took X long. That's fine. Where are the pain points? And then let's start seeing where we can leverage, for instance, automation for once the, we'll say, issue or the contract is in a done position and its period of performance ends, then let's close it and just save them the effort. So there was a lot of automation we got to leverage, and that's when we started, especially with the automation part, that's when they got ravenous for more changes, and this is awesome. Let's keep going.
Lyndsi, what about you? What kind of cases have you been dealing with in this area?
Yeah, my area of focus here has been on the development platform side of the house. So we've worked with a customer who they're developing software products for their customer, and they want to make sure that those software products they're producing are of high quality and that they're reliable. And so part of our responsibilities in terms of supporting their efforts to develop their software have been to bring in some of these ideas of iteration, automation, and testing. So we're helping them to develop and build out the infrastructure that they can use to run their CI/CD pipelines in order to automate tests at every stage of their software development. And so we've seen a lot of different areas where we're working with software people. So having these software development mindsets they're helpful in some ways, but they just don't always apply. And so we have to get a little bit creative with how we can take some of these DevSecOps principles and use them to help make the platform better for the developers.
And I know people that don't understand the pipeline kind of things that we're talking about, when you start building an infrastructure for a pipeline, you're talking about everything from getting ATO, authority to operate certifications on the software that you want. And oh, by the way, you're never going to get all the software that you want, to be aligned. You also have to get ATOs for the hardware that you want to use. So if you're not doing cloud, approved cloud stuff, you have to get, authorities for the certifications for the on-prem hardware. And oh, by the way, you've got to have all the licenses. And oh, by the way, you've got to have the contracts for the people that are going to maintain that hardware. I mean, this is a very multidimensional ecosystem if you've never run into it. And so, trying to apply Agile when you've got supply chain issues because you can only get 3/4 of the parts that you need, and we've ran into that, ever since COVID. Those are real challenges. So what are some of the problems and challenges in applying Agile and DevSecOps in atypical scenarios that you've run into? Can you walk us through any of those?
Sure, I'll start us out. From my experience, it's been more of a people problem, probably not people, but a organizational friction at some points.
Problems in the social system.
Yes, not with the system itself of why are we doing this? Yeah. We've always done it this way. One of the classic arguments. So hitting that friction is unfortunate, but most of the time you can talk through with these people by being open-minded and curious as to why they're so against it. Because if you're being like hyper inquisitive, then it's just going to result in that individual or individuals digging their heels in further. But there are ways to get around this by showing metrics to potentially show them hey, we are doing faster, we are moving faster. So that can help swing them, but also really try and understand what their pain points with it are. If it's simply the answer of, well, we've always done it this way, then that's pretty easy argument to win of that's not exactly a valid argument by any means.
And I don't know about you, but when I hear that statement, my first answer is, and how's that working for you?
Right.
Because, in almost all cases, these are people that are too busy to take training. They're too busy to do this, to do that. So the way we've always done it, is it really working for you? Is the follow-on question. Lyndsi, what about you? What are some of the problems that you've run into that you want people to be aware of?
Yeah, one thing we've seen is maybe an over-adoption of an Agile mindset where we've seen people constantly jump from problem to problem to problem, and they're saying they're being Agile, but they're totally losing sight of the overall mission of a project. And so there's even when you're being Agile, there's still a need to maintain, right? Keep your eye on the prize, understand what the mission of the project is. And within kind of that boundary, being Agile to help achieve your team's ultimate goal.
We're not looking for chaos.
Exactly.
We're looking for adaptability. We're looking for agility in the sense of being resilient, but we have chaos is not the goal. So, I recognize what you're saying about over-adoption.
Yes, sometimes it seems like people trade they put the Agile hat on, and they're like, yeah, this is great. And then they immediately take it off and put a firefighting hat on. And they're like, but this is also great. And this is the same. And it's like, no, it's
not the same.
Not the same.
Yeah, no, those are valid problems. And the problem that I alluded to as well is I'm too busy, right? I'm too busy to do anything differently. And again, how's that working for you? Are you getting done what you need to get done? Are you happy being that busy? Some people are. Many of us like to go home and have dinner at night at a reasonable hour, so, too busy is too much. So yeah, those are all good problems. They're all problems that I recognize coming into organizations that are trying to do something different. And so just be aware of those so that you're not surprised if you see those.
Yeah, exactly.
Dave, you mentioned some benefits, the ravenous appetite, but what are some of the other benefits that you've seen that you would want to make sure people know about that are thinking about doing this?
So other benefits I'd say, not to put words in others' mouths, like the morale seemed to be improved quite a bit in terms of they're not getting yelled at as much in terms of like how slow you are.
Sure.
And so that's always a good feeling. But also it wasn't as painful as say like starting to walk around the office and say like, hey, who's got this? Where's this at? So there was a better communication as well. That was a great benefit. The transparency as well, in terms for everyone to be able to look and see where is it at in the process, in the pipeline. So definitely with it, what I'm getting at there is just improved transparency and improved communication is a wonderful thing that usually spawns from.
Yeah, I'll add to what Dave said, and to that list is improved collaboration. So when people can look at a ticket in an issue tracker and say, oh, okay, so-and-so did this, and then so-and-so did that, and here's what's left that needs to be completed before we can say this project is done, is so helpful in, number one, assessing how much longer it's going to take before that work is completed, and number two, knowing who to talk to about what might be their blockers. Is there anything you can do to help them get it done faster? It's just that collaboration is just streamlined so much when you start implementing these practices.
Yeah, and I've seen this. I've seen similar benefits. The other benefit I have seen some explicit reduction in meeting time. Where there used to be 3 meetings a week to deal with a particular set of issues, and now that's down to 2 meetings a week. Now that doesn't sound like much, but those 3 meetings had over 50 people in each meeting. So, if that meeting's an hour and a half, I've saved 75 hours every week of people's time. And that builds up. And I think I'm betting that you saw some of that in the areas that you're in as well. So, there's a lot of things that are more qualitative, but there's also some quantitative benefits that, we can look at some of these scenarios and find. So we like to emphasize transition in these podcast series. And so if I'm an audience member out there looking to expand Agile and DevSecOps, let's say I'm a contracts person, beyond traditional software, what steps should I be taking and what resources are available to me that you can talk about?
So going to be a little cheeky. Check out the SEI blogs. We have a lot of really good information on this, but in particular, as people are adopting this, you might find yourself hitting challenges. And so a couple of years ago, Joe Yankel and Hassan Yusar had a blog over challenges to implementing DevSecOps and how to potentially overcome those. So I'm just going to throw that one out there as a very useful article. But we do have articles as well on some of the more challenges that you'd face. But outside of that, like when we talk about how to start, I mean, you could read like the Agile Manifesto, just to kind of get an idea. You could look at some of the additional or the other existing DevSecOps or even Agile principles and see how people have done it and start asking yourself, where can I apply this? How can I apply this? And if the answer is no, why can't I? And start asking the why question as much as possible. But make sure to also ask for like why questions that result in actual responses and not yes, no.
Always good advice. Lyndsi?
Yeah, I think Dave hit the nail on the head, and I would just add that another place to start looking if you want to implement some of these things is looking into what tools are available. There is already software out there that can help with some of these communication challenges that you're going to run into, and tools that will help improve your team's collaboration. I think look at some of those, look at the features that they offer, and then again, get creative and think about the problem you're trying to solve at your organization and how some of these tools might help you overcome it.
Okay. I'm going to add one that you guys may not be as aware of if you're not in the acquisition community, but Naval Postgraduate School does sponsor an acquisition research symposium every year. And for the last several years, they have had a track on Agile. And part of the idea is Agile in acquisition settings. So those of you that have access, and they make their proceedings public to the extent that the authors allow. So that's another resource particular sort of to the DoD acquisition community that may provide some ideas for you. Okay, so what's next for the both of you? David, you in particular, both of you have said you like working on different things. So what's the next different thing you're going to be working on that I can bring you back to talk about? Lyndsi, let's start with you.
Sure. David and I are actually working together on two new things. The first is we have started taking a look at the idea of secure by design, secure by default, and how that's being applied to software. And we're looking at different ways that we think we might be able to apply it outside of the software realm. So it's sort of within the same theme of what we're talking about today, but a slightly different angle is how do we apply this idea of secure by default when we're standing up an infrastructure platform?
Okay.
The second thing we are working on is in a lot of these projects that we've talked about today, we've noticed that there's a prevalence of a willingness to reject a lot of intensive planning in favor of constantly jumping from problem to problem and putting out fires all over an organization. And so we're thinking about why that's so prevalent and if we can come up with some interesting solutions to help organizations snap out of that sort of mindset.
I can talk to you guys about that offline because we've run into that same problem, and I won't say we have total solutions, but we certainly have seen some approaches that have worked decently. So, and David, what else are you working on? Anything where you're not working with Lyndsi?
So those are the two current things that we're both working on. I'm not working on anything additionally because we have our hands quite full of those two.
That's fair. All right. Well, I want to thank both of you for spending the time talking with us today. As you know, this is one of my topics of interest. And so having others to talk to about what are you learning? What am I learning? I love that. So thank you so much for sharing. And I want to make sure our audience knows, as always, we will include links in the transcript to resources we've mentioned during the podcast. And a reminder to our audience that these podcasts are available all kinds of places: SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple, Google. I'm sure there's others. And of course, our favorite, the SEI's YouTube channel. So if you like what you see and hear today, give us a thumbs up because, that's always helpful on YouTube. I want to thank all of you again for joining us in the audience. And thank you again, Lyndsi and David, for talking with me today.
Thanks for joining us. This episode is available where you download podcasts, including SoundCloud, TuneIn Radio, and Apple Podcasts. It is also available on the SEI website at sei.cmu.edu/podcasts and the SEI's YouTube channel. This copyrighted work is made available through the Software Engineering Institute, a federally funded research and development center sponsored by the U.S. Department of Defense. For more information about the SEI and this work, please visit www.sei.cmu.edu. As always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email us at info@sei.cmu.edu. Thank you.